Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Yep, Charlamagne the God, Angela Yee. We are the world's most dangerous morning show, The Breakfast Club. Our guy DJ Envy is not here today, but I got, man, a brother that I love and value and appreciate so much here with us. Resmaa Menakem is here.
Good to see you, Black man.
How you doing, King?
I'm doing good, brother. I'm doing good, man.
New book out? The Quaking of America, an embodied guide to navigating our nation's upheaval and racial reckoning. Woo.
Yeah, man. It's a beast.
Okay, what's the title about?
So, whenever you, and you know this, whenever you write a book, the publisher always wants you to write the same book again.
That's right.
So I had originally started writing, a book called Our Grandchildren's Souls. And it was basically about legacy and how do we create a living, embodied, anti-racist legacy culture as opposed to just like being nice to each other. And then January 6th happened. And soon as that happened, I was like, I can't keep writing this book. Because I think America sometimes, we have seminal moments, and then what we do a lot of times is we forget those seminal moments. And I wanted to enshrine it in the book. And so it really is about what it is that we saw on January 6th and how that actually is a testimony and a testament to our history, to the intergenerational trauma, to the persistent institutional trauma, and then our own personal pieces. And so the Quaking of America is really about how that shows up and what we begin to do about it. I mean, really right now, when you look at what happened January 6th, people are not even really talking about it.
No, not at all. An attempted coup in this country happened.
Attempted coup.
And then what's going to happen in the future
Right.
after that, because you have some predictions as well.
Right.
That's not normal in a democracy.
No. It should be normal. It should be normal in any country. But in this country, we get so enamored with forgetting things, right? And what ends up happening, I think, sometimes is that we don't learn the lessons that we need to learn. And when you watch, here's one of the things that happened when January 6th happened. I wasn't even watching what was going on. And then all of a sudden, Maria, my wife, goes, "Resmaa!" and she screams, right? And she's upstairs in the bedroom. I come upstairs and you see like 2,000 people showing up to this thing. And so I just sat down and we started watching it. And then all of a sudden, you start seeing the symbols of our past. You start seeing the noose show up, right? Remember? Then you start seeing the swastika show up, right? Then you start seeing the AR-15 show up. Then you start seeing people kick the windows out. And I'm thinking as I'm watching this, I'm like, ain't nobody dead yet? They haven't shot anybody yet? If that had been 6,000 black folks, or 6,000 indigenous people, or 6,000 Mexican people, there wouldn't have been enough body bags. That's right. And then when they finally started kicking in the doors and nobody stopped them, I was like, this is a seminal moment. This is the past showing up right now.
That's right.
And so for me, my whole thing in the book was like, look, if white people, and particularly white people, if you saw that and that didn't spur you to take a self-defense course, that didn't spur you to learn weapons training, that didn't spur you to take a psychological first aid course, if that didn't spur you to do that, then you're not taking what you just saw seriously.
You know what? In my grandmother's hands, and January 6th reminded me of that. You spoke to how, before they did that to enslaved Africans, before they did that to indigenous people, they did it to themselves.
They did it to themselves.
Yes.
And that's the whole piece. The whole piece for me is that white bodies got conditioned around whiteness in a way that allowed them to not see not only our humanity, but their own humanity. Most white bodies that are listening to this call right now are descended from white bodies that were fleeing something.
Break that down.
So what we call American immigrants, like most of the time when we think about it, we think about those black and white pictures of white people coming off the boats, right, and all that different type of stuff. But if you go 100 years before that, most of them were fleeing famine. Most of them were fleeing religious persecution. Most of them were fleeing the Middle Ages. They were fleeing other white bodies who were brutalizing them. And then they landed here. And then what ended up happening is that most of those bodies got sold right after the Bacon Rebellion, got sold the idea of whiteness by elite white bodies. So elite white bodies sold poor white bodies the idea of whiteness as a way to get around the brutality. But that fleeing never got dealt with. And the conduit for dealing with it was really the black and indigenous body. So all of that trauma, all of that hurt, all of that pain, blow it through their bodies, right? And so that's the whole setup. This whole setup is around, and this is where I talk about the difference between identity and body, right? So black, brown, and indigenous people all have identities, right? We might be transgender, we might be gay, we might be straight, we might be whatever. We have all of these different identities. And we are also bodies of culture or black bodies. And what ends up happening is that people conflate identity with pigmentocracy. We live in a pigmentocracy. There was a structure that was set up based on looking out in the fields and seeing that you are less human, you are a species, than the white bodies standing next to you. And so those pieces have never gotten dealt with in America. And in the Quaking of America, I'm trying to begin to do that, trying to begin to work with that.
You know, I noticed that too when we see people fleeing from Ukraine, and because they're white, we have a different amount of sympathy, but then people are fleeing from oppression and all kinds of violence in their countries, but if they come from black and brown places, it's like there's no sympathy for that.
Right. Sis, do you remember, this was not even a year ago, we saw white men on horsebacks beating Haitians crossing the river. Mm-hmm. Remember that? I mean, if that is not a direct, those pictures were direct ties to our historical past, right? And so when you watch people this is why I talk about a pigmentocracy, right? The pigmentocracy is global, right? When you watch people fleeing a war zone in the Ukraine, and you have soldiers saying, you can come on the boat, you get off the bus, you do that. That's based on a pigmentocracy. That's not based on whether or not those people are citizens. That's not based on whether those people are workers within that country. That's based on a pigmentocracy. You are less human and you are more human. And so therefore you can get on the planes and the bus, and even though we're in the war zone and we're all trying to escape, right? That's what I mean. That's so in Quaking, I'm really trying to land that piece and have people understand that this idea of black skin being less of a less human is the race question in this country is a species question first. Is Charlamagne a human or not? And the answer for America is no, he is not. Is Sister Yee a human or not? And the answer structurally and philosophically has always been no.
It was in the Constitution.
It was in the, I mean, it's 3/5 of, people always talk about 3/5 being just a voting clause. No, you had people in the room. Here's what I always say to people. The 3/5 clause came out of debate, which means that you had people in the room debating how much those other bodies were actually worth. That idea transcends through time, and that's what we're dealing with. When you see all of these, when you see the brutality that our people have experienced, you see it in both big demonstrative things, you see it in mundane things, like when you watch what happened between Brother Will and Chris Rock, you're watching, when you watched him walk up the steps, you watched history walk up the steps. His own personal history, the historical, the intergenerational,
That's right.
and the institutional. You could see the pain walking up the steps.
That's right.
You could see the heartbreak in Brother Chris's face from that. You could see the heartbreak in, people talk about Chris, they talk about Brother Will, and they talk about Jada, but what they don't talk about is a person that was off to the side that actually represented the community, and that was Sister Lupita Nyong'o. When you watch her face when that happens, you see heartbreak, you see fear, you see all of those different, just slow the tape down. You see a rupture, and that rupture has historical underpinnings.
Another thing that's current that's been happening with Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, and we saw her being questioned and the things that they were saying about her and to her and the messaging that the Republicans were putting out who were voting against her. And so that's something too, because I know a lot of what you discuss is also political.
Yeah.
in context too when we talk about Republican and their messaging and how Democrats operate as far as trying to be more concerned about policy than anything else.
First off, she wasn't being questioned. What was happening was that she was being what I call, and there's been a lot of writing on this, is what's called spirit murder, right? The questioning and the things that they were doing were about attacking and undermining her humanity first. Notice the questioning. The questioning was not, what have you done? What's the laws? What are the things that, right? The questioning was around, are you human enough? Yeah. Right? And that's always the subtext. Yeah. Right?
They want to make her small morally. Question her morals.
That's right. Question her morals. Question her actual humanity. Right? You don't really deserve to be here. Right? That spirit murder is a facet of America. Right? In order to enslave a people, right? Black people were never slaves. We were enslaved, which means something happened, right? In order to do that, you have to spirit murder people. You have to undermine. You have to cut them. You have to make them believe that the brother or the sister next to them is their mortal enemy, right? That's part of the spirit murder. And when you watch what they did to Sister Kedanji, that's what you're watching is spirit murder. You're not just watching questioning. And what we have to begin to do is we have to begin to change our language. We have to begin to change our language and make sure that it's an embodied language. Like when you were watching what they were doing to Sis, I would imagine, just knowing you, Sis, that you were watching and going, probably using not so good words, right? But something about what they were doing, even though it looked like questioning, something about it seemed brutal.
Yeah, evil.
Right? That's exactly right. That's the spirit murder stuff.
That's why I appreciate what Cory Booker said, but in that moment, you got to check them white boys.
Come on.
Before you pour into her.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It didn't feel right. It felt like you was like you felt like you watched Sister get slapped in the face.
Right.
And you're pouring into her saying it was so good you didn't do anything, you didn't fight back.
Right.
But the person that slapped him is right there and you didn't say nothing to him.
That's right.
You know?
That's the piece that I think in terms of Quaking. Like a friend of mine that read Quaking, she said, Resmaa, my grandmother's hands was like a warm blanket. Quaking is like a dark alley.
Ooh, Lord.
Right? Because I'm moving into some places that people don't really want to go. And you just hit on it, right? I love the fact that he poured into her. I love the fact that somebody said, I see you, sis. I see you. I love you. And I know what they're doing, right? That's beautiful, right? And at the same time, the piece that you're saying also needs to come to the fore, too. Right. Somebody should have said, and there was nobody that should have said, that could have said it, right? But him at that moment should have said, hey, all the stuff that they doing is foul. They foul. You ain't crazy. They are out of pocket. And I'm going to say something to them, right? But see, when we go to do that, now we're responding from, people want to position us as we're responding from what's small in us, and we're not. When we're protecting each other, and protecting doesn't necessarily always mean physical protection, but sometimes you got to talk. Sometimes you got to say, look, back up. Quit talking to her like that. That's not how we're supposed to get down. And you're not going to do it. You may do it in front of other people, but you can't do it in front of me, right? So you're absolutely right. But that's what Quaking is about us beginning to really understand that this structure and the philosophy is going to eviscerate you. So you might as well say something while they're trying to do it.
You know, in the first chapter of the book, you quote Stuart Stevens, who says, for the first time since 1860, a major American political party, the Republicans, doesn't believe America is a democracy. How significant is that statement?
Well, we've always known that, right?
That's right.
We've always so I had an indigenous brother tell me one time this is years ago when I was arguing about political parties and stuff like that, the Republicans and the Democrats, and one of the things he said, and we just both started laughing when he said right wing, left wing are all part of the same racist bird.
That's right.
and that's what that means, that in the book I really go at everybody, I'm going at because I think we have to have a more mature understanding about what we're dealing with. This idea that we're going to resolve this by putting more Democrats in office, we're going to resolve this by putting more Republicans in office, or whatever, really misses the point. The point is that there is a racist ground founding of this country.
I agree.
And if you don't understand that, and if you don't have your own self-interest clear, then you'll be fooled. You'll think that Joe Biden, a dude who ushered in some of the most horrible laws as it relates to black people.
That's right.
You'll think that he's your savior, right? As opposed to, no, maybe what I need to do is understand what my self-interest is and make sure that he does what I need him to do for our people. And so that's what that statement is about. It's about us being more and more clear about what we're seeing is actually happening.
Yes.
It's actually, you know what I mean?
Because it's not normal, but for some reason it's all coming off as like this is supposed to happen. No. This isn't even politics anymore.
It's not. And when you have, listen, one of the things that I believe Trump did, man, was Trump allowed us to Trump allowed us to say, oh, that's the real. I mean, they like that. So here's the thing that I always think about. More white women voted for Trump the second time than the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just hold. I mean, after all of that, they voted for him in more numbers. That lets you know that there's something about that thing that he's selling that is so intrinsic to America that even when he shows you, I don't give a hoot about you, you still vote for him in droves. That's the fleeing stuff that I believe never got dealt with, right, among white folks. The what I call plantation ethics, right? The idea that you have a strong man, right, particularly a strong white man that absolves you of all of your sins, right, and will protect you at all costs. That runs through America.
And you also talk about Republicans and their core messaging underneath Trump and how a lot of that can really contradict itself. But the main thing is that you feel unsafe and under attack.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it. The safety piece is huge. The people say, well, how is it that Trump got in office? Well, he appeals to that idea that there are these heathens, these unruly slaves, these unsophisticated primates, right? Knocking at your door, going to date your daughters, going to take your jobs, right? That piece never got healed, and when they created the idea of white body supremacy and whiteness, it gave poor white people a chance not to question that. Hey, why am I playing allegiance to this white man that's putting the boot to me too? Right? That never gets questioned when you put the idea out there. I will keep you safe. I'm the one that's going to put up the border wall. I'm the one that's going to do it. But I don't want to take the complicitors off the table, the Democrats. Their fecklessness and their unwillingness to fight.
That's right.
Right? You know, it's like this, Charlamagne. When we were coming up, right? You had to, if somebody took something from you, you could maybe try and talk to them first. But if they put their hands on you,
you got to put hands back.
You got to put hands back. The Democrats think that they can negotiate everything. We can go to the back room, we can sit, we can talk, we can have a cigar, and you're talking to somebody who is you're talking to somebody who is in the middle of a fight, right? And you're trying to negotiate with them, right? And this is the other reason why a lot of black folks don't trust the Democrats. It's because they refuse to fight.
That's right.
And they're not unified with each other.
No.
The way that Republicans are. So we have people that are Democrats but feel you have to be really conservative, which is basically like being a Republican.
Exactly right. But see, and I'm going to say something that's probably going to be pretty unpopular. That through line to whiteness being the standard and the conservative pieces being the standard is part of the foundation of America. It's why President Barack Obama moved the way that he moved.
That's right.
He moved in a very conservative way, right? Trying to appeal across the aisle, trying to do that different type of stuff, because that is the foundation, right? That white comfort trumps everything, right?
Man, it's always so interesting, with the Quaking of America and my grandmother's hands. It's like white people have found a way to talk about America almost the way we should. Mm-hmm. Like, no, not the almost way, the way we actually should. Like, we should, based off their history, we're the ones that should be terrified.
Exactly.
We're the ones that should be in fear. But I always just find it so incredible that they've flipped the script.
Right. Well, so one of the things that Brother Kendi X says, Kendi talks about self-interest first, that racism and white body supremacy really isn't about hatred first. Hatred is a byproduct of people's self-interest, right? So it is within people's self-interest to uphold a white body or a white supremacist system, right? White people, this is why I talk about in Quaking, I say that your niceness and your kindness is actually inadequate to deal with the brutality that's being heaped on black and brown and indigenous people every day. So this idea that that white people are in fear is part of the whole piece. Right after the Civil War, that you had before the Civil War, you had good Negroes. And you had, nice and dumb and all that different type of stuff. After the Civil War is when you start to see the images of the feral black man and the feral black woman, right? That's when you start to begin to see that. So one of the things that I talk about in Quaking is this idea. Think about this for a minute. All three of us right now come from a people, right, who were raped for 250 years legally.
Every time you say that, I'll be like, ugh.
Yeah. The trauma of what people had to do in order to survive that, and then how it shows up in you as anxiety, how it shows up in me as rage, how it shows up in you as sad. You see what I mean? That stuff never gets questioned, and these pieces are traumatic, right? Mm-hmm. That's why I talk about things from a trauma perspective, that for us to be in a society where the white body deems and has deemed itself the supreme standard by which all bodies' humanity shall be measured structurally and philosophically, it is an advantage to be born in a white body in that structure. Not just a privilege, an advantage.
I mean, look at the white woman this weekend stabbed her boyfriend.
Out eating.
And it's no criminal investigation, no nothing. They just deem it as, there was no crime.
That's
like,
right.
Huh?
That's right. Not only that, she out in public.
Yep. Living her life.
She living her best life after stabbing a man. Killing him and covered in blood. Right? And this is why I say, if you don't understand that one rule, that the white body is the supreme standard, and every other body, physical body, is a deviance from the standard. If you don't understand that, then everything about America will confuse you.
And another thing is they keep on bringing up his old tweets and things that he had posted.
That's right.
I guess that's supposed to make us feel like
justified.
Yeah.
Right. Murdering.
Or we don't care because of some old tweets.
They did the same thing with Tamir Rice.
That's right.
They did the same thing with Trayvon Martin. They any time there is a black body that is murdered like that.
Michael Brown did him bad.
You see what I mean? Yeah. There's an immediate undermining, because that undermining actually is part of the soil of America. You always go to, if there is a black body and a white body, the white body gets the benefit of the doubt, the black body does not. And we have to start seeing that as part of the structure as opposed to episodes.
In the Quaking of America, you talk about there's a war being planned. Mm-hmm. What is that war?
Well, it's being planned, but I want people to hear it in a particular way. I want people, when I say planned, I mean permission. Mm-hmm. Okay? That when you see what happened in January 6th, and then you fast forward to now, the urgency of what you saw, it doesn't seem like the same urgency is in investigating it.
At all.
You see what I mean? That, like, the urgency of people are kicking in the Capitol doors and the windows and peeing and crapping on the floors, and something has to be done, right? That same urgency you don't notice right now, right? And when I talk about there's a war, I'm saying that and I'm primarily talking about, like, black and brown body with any sense of consciousness. We know what we see. We're seeing this. This is crazy, right? White bodies, though, what happens is that they get shocked and awed by things like that. Oh my God, who would do that, right? Why would somebody do that? And it's just a few people, right? But what happens is that time decontextualizes it. So over time, they forget the urgency, right? And they want to go back to normal. Notice, have you heard that? The same thing with COVID, same thing with this. Mm-hmm. We want to go back to normal, right? And what that means is we don't want to have any type of constriction. We don't want to have any types of problems. So white comfort gets recentered in every situation. And what happens is, yeah, brother, what happens is that right now, white people are so comfortable that they don't see that when these 10, 12, 20 million people with AR-15s who believe wholeheartedly in the white body supremacist ethos, that when they start shooting, if you are not aligned with their ethos, they will murder you and your children too. That's right. The same way that they did Sandy Hook, the same way that they do all of these different types of things that you forget about, right? Or you see as episodic as opposed to structural. So Quaking is really about, you need to take this seriously, white people.
Yeah, they hate niggas, but they hate nigga lovers even more.
Even more. And here's the other piece. Not only do they hate black people, right? But they hate anybody who is not aligned with their philosophy. That's the piece. You think your whiteness protects you because you're not out here screaming the N-word. But it really doesn't, because when they wave that AR in front of your face and ask you who you voting for, who you doing this, or who you doing that, you either gonna give it up and say, I'm gonna align myself with you, or you're gonna be murdered. And white bodies in mass don't understand that. They think that this was just an incident, when it's actually structural.
And we have elections coming up, and we've seen a lot of voter suppression laws being passed across the country. So one thing that we should be nervous about is what is going to happen when people feel intimidated to even go out and vote.
Exactly.
So what are some things we can do, because this is a healing process too? Yeah. And also a take action. What are some things that we can do?
I think continue to demand that our local politicians respond to what we need locally. I think continue to demand that the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act goes through. I think the voting rights law needs to. I mean, all of these different types of things. But we don't.
You got more hope than me.
No, I don't. No, I wasn't saying that in a hopeful way. I don't have hope in this structure. I have hope in black people. I have hope in bodies of culture. I think that the system is. I think the system only. It will only do what you demand of it. And I think we have to continue to demand that they respond to what it is that we need and we want. And so my hope is that black women, in terms of like the Democratic Party, if it's not for black women, the Democratic Party really doesn't exist. In terms of any type of federal. And so for me, it is my hope that black women continue to mobilize, that they continue to demand, that they continue to come together, and they continue to say, this is what we want. Now, I don't know what they want, but this is what we want. That's my hope. It's not in the political structure. Right now, Biden could give black people relief. There's like 10 different things that he could do by signing, just signing stuff, right? One of them is he could take marijuana off the Schedule 1.
That's right.
Right?
At least decriminalize it.
Decriminalize it.
That's the least you could do is decriminalize it.
And there's about 10 different things that he could do right now. Those are the types of things I think we can begin to demand. But thinking he's going to do it because he's a nice guy, or thinking he's going to do it without us demanding it is he feels like he has more in common with Mitch McConnell than he does me and you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think true healing will ever come from politics.
I think healing is always ground up. My own healing has been ground up.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to earn my healing, right? I've had to make choices about my healing. I've had to make choices around, when I got back from Afghanistan, who I bought in my life and who wasn't in my life, right? I had to make choices about who was in my kids' life and who was in my family. You know what I mean? This is the same thing. We are at a point now as Black, brown, and indigenous people. We're going to have to make loud choices about who we have in our lives and who we have doing work for us. And this is, I see it as the same thing. Healing is a piece that is earned. It's not a piece that all of a sudden you notice you're healed, right? It's all of a sudden you notice, oh, I ain't doing the same thing I used to do. I have a little bit more room, right? That happens as you work, as you do things, as you make choices.
What are some things people should pay attention to when it comes to their body's response? Because I know that is a large part of this new book, The Quaking of America. So I want to talk about that a little bit, because I was trying to like do these exercises while I was reading it.
Yeah. The most important part of the book, both that and My Grandmother's Hands, is really the practices. Right, all of the practices, right? And the reason is that the practices help to condition and temper your body to withstand the 400 and 500 years of charge associated with race, right? Race, that concept of race has a 400-year-old charge to it. That's why when you start to begin to talk about race across culture, right? A black body trying to talk with race to a white body, right? You notice charge come in the room. You notice an energy, right? Even if you like each other, even if you agree with each other, you notice a heat, a pressure, a texture, something else coming into the room. Most of us haven't conditioned our body to be able to withstand that charge. So when the charge shows up, we either go to rage, or we go to collapse, or we go to buts, but we can't hold it. Right? And so a lot of the practices in the book are about conditioning the body to be able to withstand and withhold and create a container that can actually hold the charge of race, so you can begin not only individually, but individually and collectively. So you notice a lot of the practices in the book are not just individual practices, they're also collective practices, right? Because what happened to us did not happen to us individually. It also happened communally. When they hung my great-great-grandmother from a bridge, that wasn't about her only. That was about me walking across the bridge and seeing that, right? The terror was designed to be instilled within the community. So to only develop an individual response to a communal horror is inadequate. And so a large part of the book is developing communal practices with each other, right? So we can hold this charge together.
You know, I love talking to you for a number of different reasons, but you know, even just the way you see things, because you know, healed people see things differently, right? Like when you talk about the Chris and Will situation, all I saw was pain, period, right? Yep. But you also had some interesting things. When you saw Kodak Black, you said you saw some things.
That young brother worries me. The pain and the brutality and the things that he's seen and the things that he's experienced. We have a tendency when people are stars and they're movie stars and all of that different type of stuff, we have a tendency to almost shun their pain. And when I'm listening to the brother and I'm watching his cadence and watching his the way that he moves, there's a tremendous amount of brutality that brother has experienced, that he's seen. And I believe we have to start to begin to see each other's humanity. Besides all of the money and all of that different type of stuff, I think we have to begin to see that our people are hurting, and there's been a rupture, right? And we have to be about how do we repair the rupture that our people have experienced for 400 years and personally, right? And so when I see him, and I've seen y'all interview him, every time I see him, my heart breaks. When I saw Will, slap Chris, my heart broke because there's a rupture that has happened that until it's so big and demonstrative, that's when we pay attention to it, right? But when they're entertaining us, when they're dancing, when they're singing songs, we don't see the rupture, right? And when I called you about him, when I said, if reach out to that brother, let him know, right? That's what I was trying to get at, was that I saw because I'm there, I'm hurting, I'm in pain too, so I know what it's like when I see it, and so yeah, brother, I think the idea of rupture, the seeing rupture and developing ways to repair that rupture is what we have to be about with each other. Yeah,
I mean, it's not normal, right? Like even when we saw what we saw at the Oscars. Yeah, you get your jokes off and it's entertaining, but that's not normal. That's
normal.
A man who for 30 years, we have never seen any of that.
You're absolutely right. Can I tell you what one of the things, so there was two pieces that happened for me that happened during that thing. The first one was yes, what happened in the pain. I could see the historical stuff walking up the stage when he started walking up the stage, right? When he started walking up, I was like, you could experience it, right? And then when he did what he did, and you saw Chris's face, and you could see the heartbreak in his face, like what, like that.
Because he's been bullied his whole life. He's
that's
documented
right.
that.
That's exactly right. And but the other piece that I saw, brother, was after that. And this is what I call about the rupture. There was a rupture, and then the repair was then you had two older black men that wrapped their arms around Will, right? That you had Tyler Perry and Denzel wrapped their arms around him. That's the repair pieces. You called Chris, checked on him, right? That's the repair pieces, right? Those are the repair pieces that you keep coming back to, that we have to keep coming back to, because otherwise we'll be trapped in the thinking that the only thing that's out there is rupture. No. That's not the only thing. The standard is repair. The standard is love. The standard is joy, right? And when Will did that, and those two older brothers wrapped their arms around him and said, "Come here, man," right? "I love you. This was out of pocket. And I love you." When you reached out to Chris, "Hey, man, I love you. That was out of pocket. Whatever you need, I got you," right? That's the standard, right? And you're right. Everybody's talking jokes, and everybody got their opinion, right? If Will would have did this to me, I'd have did that. That's besides the point, right? The point is that our people are hurting. The point is it's gone unaddressed, continues to go unaddressed, and we have to start addressing it.
Some people think that is a way to protect black women.
Yeah.
What happened, and I saw that conversation happening amongst a lot of people.
Right. You know how I protect black women in my life? I don't hurt them physically. You know how I protect black women in my life? My wife, I don't cheat on my wife.
That's right.
You know how I protect black women in my life? I love my daughter.
That's right.
Right?
And work on yourself.
And I do my own. And I'm a therapist, and I've been a therapist for a lot of years. I have a therapist. Right? Because when you in the middle of a thing, you can't see on the outside of a thing. Right? You need somebody on the outside saying, "Hey, this is what I'm tracking. This is what I'm saying." So how I love black women is to work on myself and get myself better and get myself healed. Right? So the black women that come into my life are not brutalized by those unhealed things.
Yeah, I think emotionally and mentally we could cause more abuse. Just by being a hurt individual.
Exactly right. Exactly right. The thing about our people, man, is that our people have so much love in us. We have so much love in us, but it's been thwarted and brutalized. And even with that, we're still reaching out to each other. We still saying, brother, I love you, sister, I love you, this matters to me, right? But there's a lot of unheard, and here's the other piece. The brutality that our people experienced is not post, right? It's not post. We talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. Our people don't experience post-traumatic stress disorder. Our people experience pervasive and persistent traumatic stress disorder. It's still happening. Post would imply that it's done and past. We're still dealing with a pervasive brutality, a pervasive terrorism that is aimed at our bodies, right? And we haven't been able to articulate it. We haven't been able to develop a cultural understanding of it. And so part of what Quaking is to say, you're not crazy. You're not defective. What you think is actually happening is actually happening.
Yeah. Even when you talk about the standard being joy.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be a hard concept for me to grasp, but it is.
Yeah.
Like, is that black people's standard? I don't.
Yeah. Well, let me say this. Black bodies, black people, don't come to the planet disconnected from creation itself. Okay? We are representations of creation itself. The first human being on the planet was a black woman. We are descended from that. Okay? Joy is part of us because we are part of creation. What happens is that the brutalness and the feralness of this white body supremacist system and structure thwarts it. It doesn't eliminate it. It thwarts it. It's like putting a cap on some Mountain Dew and shaking it up, right? It'll come out the sides and everything, right? But it gets thwarted by the cap. That's what trauma is. That's what racial trauma is. It thwarts it. But the essence is joy. Let me give you an example. When that thing happened with Chris and Will, you reached out to Chris because you loved him. That's the standard.
I reached out to both of them, actually,
right?
Because I love them. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's the standard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? If it had not have been the standard, you'd have been like, oh, F them, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? No, it was the standard, right? You went back to the standard. Besides all of this stuff, I love you. I love you, right? I don't care who else reaches out. I love you. And so you made that move, right? That's the standard. We get so caught up day to day trying to deal with this brutality that we think the standard is the fighting, that we think the standard is the rupture. That's not the standard.
Ooh. Yeah. What's that saying you always say that I love? Trauma, with something shows up as culture?
Trauma, so time decontextualizes trauma. Just time, the march of time. If something like, for me, when I was coming up, I was sexually assaulted as a kid, right? As the years went past, that became decontextualized, right? I didn't remember it, but it kept showing up in the background, right? I didn't remember it. Little things would happen and stuff like that. But then, and so what happens is that as time decontextualizes the trauma for me personally, it can now go unaddressed and look like personality. So trauma decontextualized in the person can look like personality over time. Trauma decontextualized in a family can look like family traits over time. Trauma decontextualized in the people can look like culture over time. And so we can get we can get organized around the trauma in order to survive it. And by the time it gets to me and you, because we done got it passed down through our caregivers, right? By what their bodies recoiled from and leaned into, not just instruction, but what they recoiled from and leaned in. I may not know why mama, does that, but I know I need to pay attention to it. That's how I learn it. By the time it gets to us, it's just notions. It's just ideas. It's just, something feels weird about that, right? And what I'm trying to get people to understand is not weird. It's just uninvestigated.
Right.
It's uninterrogated. And the more we begin to interrogate it individually and communally, the more that emergence, that joy can come up. But if you never work with it, the joy can't come up because it's being thwarted.
So what kind of context does the Quaking of America give to our collective trauma?
Well, one context is, I've been saying it throughout the whole show. You're not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right.
You are not defective. There's nothing wrong with you. And we have to go about the business of healing that, right? We can't just say, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, and that's it. There's nothing wrong with me, and stuff happened to me. And stuff is happening to me. And stuff has happened to my people. And so now I have to address that. And the unwillingness to address it creates more sickness.
Oof. His name is Resmaa Menakem.
We have
he's one
work
of our,
to do, yes.
Yes, we got work to do. He's one of our greatest teachers, one of our greatest healers, man. If you got my grandmother's hands, then you definitely want to go get the Quaking of America, an embodied guide to navigating our nation's upheaval and racial reckoning. Resmaa, always a pleasure, my brother.
And listen, come meet him in person
Yeah.
at my coffee shop. Coffee uplifts people. And you will be there today. And we'll
Right.
make sure that everybody can come through, get their book signed.
That's right.
We'll be having a conversation. I'll be there, of course, as
That's
well, because
right.
I wouldn't miss that for anything.
That's it.
And we
That's
really
it.
appreciate you.
Sis, I appreciate you. I love you. Thank you for what you're doing. And I just appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Always.
All right,
It's
man.
Resmaa Menakem. It's the Breakfast Club.
Yeah.